In most video games, what you do is significant and exciting. You kill monsters or enemies, you save people's lives. You find or craft weapons, you train to be more powerful. You solve conflicts.
We have a problem with a guy from the new camp.
And in some way or another, you end up saving the world. In Gothic, you also do almost all of these things, yet when you do, it feels so much more important than in other games. And the reason for that is that for a lot of the time, you do seemingly unimportant things. Gothic shows the significance of banality for a video game. The first thing that banality does is create plausibility. Truth is that reality is often difficult, grey, and seemingly meaningless. For a video game to seem plausible and real, there is no other way but to make large parts of it banal. In Gothic, this is true for almost all aspects. Story, level design, enemies, weapons, animations, quests, and most of all, the problems that the people of the world face. The NPC's living situation is primitive. Most of them are lucky to have a hut or a tent, and some resort to stealing them. One well-known digger even blocks the road with his hut, and now suffers the consequences. We know that many are overworked, and some physically suffer.
Back aches, my arms feel like they're gonna drop off, my tongue's bone dry, and I'm dead tired.
Most have to survive on meager rations, while some even have mental problems and seek comfort in drugs or religion. These problems are not significant for the story or the gameplay, they are just the realistic outcome of the situation we find in Gothic. The player also experiences these, paying protection money and dealing with the consequences when refusing to.
I think you haven't paid any ore taxes to me yet.
Being forced to work mundane jobs. Getting rid of annoying acquaintances. Getting information in return for small favors. Finding a place to sleep. Getting food. Getting clothes. Having torches to find your way in the night. Having maps to find your target location at all. Even the missions are mostly banal. Go to the mine to get a list. Get meat and mushrooms for a stew. Tell someone to get back to work. Sell a bunch of drugs. Without such insignificant tasks and problems, the world would not feel organic, because everything that lives and breathes has small problems and itches. This is not a fairy tale world. You're not a knight in shining armor yet, and you, like all the others, are made of flesh. But the banality of the world of Gothic does not only make it more plausible, it also draws you in. Why is it important to Gothic players that you can sit on benches? The mechanic serves no practical purpose, you gain nothing from it in terms of story or gameplay. But ever since the developers have stopped implementing this animation in newer titles, fans have wished for it to return. The reason might also be realism, but that's hardly the most unrealistic thing in the game. The value of such banalities is much more subtle. Being able to do banal things melts you together with the world. You no longer feel like a foreign body in it. You no longer observe, you participate. When you stand around the campfire and play the lute, it is an act of immersion. You follow the same rules as the NPCs. You might feel like eating scavenger meat, although a health potion would be much more efficient. You may want to smoke swamp weed, even though there is no practical benefit to it. What you do there is you take the perspective of the average digger, bandit, or mercenary in the game, who are able to feel hungry, thirsty, tired, or horny. Game developers have forgotten that players do not only want to be exceptional in a game, they also want to be normal. Only then does it have real meaning when you become exceptional. This phenomenon and desire by gamers can also be seen in GTA, where players sometimes try to follow the traffic rules instead of causing a mass homicide. This is not only boredom, but the attempt to enter the game more deeply. Gothic allows for this in a number of ways. There are long and elaborate beer drinking animations. You can stir the cooking pot. You can light campfires. You can smoke the water pipe. You can spin the meat on the campfire. Or you can just sit there and watch the others go about their business. Banality is everywhere, and it is your opening into the world. Banality has one more fundamental use for a game. It creates significance by contrast. Modern games have a problem with oversaturation. I do not mean colors, but they too showed a different philosophy of Gothic. What we see in Gothic is mostly brown, grey or beige, so that when we see colors, they stand out and they have significance. The same is true for the story and the gameplay, but also the level design. On one hand, the loot is meager most of the time and even useless. We find banal items, such as razors, empty cups or beer. But then sometimes we might find a chest that has one strong weapon or one potion in it, and it feels like a true treasure. The cheaper loot does not demotivate us, but it enhances the value of that which is hard to obtain. The environment of Gothic is not filled to the brim with interesting or spectacular buildings, monuments or symbols either. In fact, it is rather empty. What we see is rotting waste, litter, rotten wood, ruins, unimpressive shelters, small caves, and makeshift structures. Gothic is often praised for its environmental storytelling, but it is rarely noted that these are often banal stories. There are only a handful of protruding locations, and they are truly important to the story. But they can only feel important because the rest of the world feels banal. And even those few important locations are covered with a layer of normalcy. Unfortunately, all of this changes in the latter half of the game. Because of a lack of time and resources, the developers chose to neglect the banal aspects of the game. This phase feels less plausible, we feel less of a connection to the world, and what we do seems less important. We fight spectacular enemies, we find amazing loot, we enter enormous structures, and we experience an orgy of violence. But what people remember is the satisfaction they felt when they got their first pair of pants. The idea for this video actually came when I tried to understand why I disliked the teaser of the upcoming Gothic remake. Many places seemed like a faithful copy of the original, but there was something off. I hope that the developers at Alkimia Interactive understand that less is often more, not only in story and gameplay, but also level and creature design. I also see easy ways to expand on banal features that were missing in the original. For example, why not allow for the players to use training animations, both for melee weapons and magic? Let us sit on the ground, let us drink from rivers, and let us do routine work for our faction. I hope that I was able to show you a new perspective on this timeless game and look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments.